knee replacement, so.
Okay, well, yeah.
If I go up too much like this, then I have
Make
to-
yourself comfortable,
Yeah.
so, you know.
But I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Should we do this officially?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Jeanne Schmidt, and I'm here today to teach you the beginning of writing your life story class. And this thing came about because many years ago I lost what I thought was going to be my lifelong career, and I ended up spending some time in a motorhome and traveling the United States and working at odd jobs. It was a wonderful experience, but the best thing about it was that most of the people I met were 10, 15, 20 years older than I was, because I was only 38 at the time. And we would sit around the campfire and we would talk, and they would tell me these wonderful stories about their life. And I just was enthralled with what all of these people had done in their lifetimes. Eventually, I found a class in California that would teach me the best basics of writing your life story. So I did that, and then I began teaching at a local senior center there. And eventually I got enough information together that I wrote this little workbook called The Life Worth Writing, and it's basically a step-by-step workbook on how to go about writing your life story. And doing it in an easy way, leisurely, at your own time. I had it published twice, and hopefully within the next few months it'll be in its third publication. So I might actually have some available for you. Anyway.
I'd like to get one. So.
Yes, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. My story has been in process since I could write. It's been recorded on scraps of paper, notes, in journals, and numerous letters to family and friends. I've loved the written word all of my life and have had many letters passed on to complete strangers for the sheer quality of their content. A savor of all, I now find myself teaching a class and needing to put these items into somewhat an organized collection. Hence the book came about. With the death of my younger sister and my father, the frailties of my earthly existence have been made real, and a need to complete this project has surfaced. Why do you write? Not for publication, although I found that to be very exciting, not because I have lived such a wonderful life, but I write for my own therapy, for growth, for clarity, and the desire to leave a record for family and friends of wisdom gained and humorous exploits experienced. Maybe some of these are the same reasons that you will write your letters, your story. Recording milestones and how they came to be, marriages, divorces, deaths, the vanishing experiences of attending a one-room school, living without a telephone and indoor plumbing. All of these things are recorded. The pleasure and education of living full-time for 10 years in an RV was sandwiched between a career in Colorado and new beginnings as a teacher in California. My desire for you is to create your own story with the help of this workbook. So I want to thank you all for coming. I know Sheila here has started her story because I have taught her since we think 2006.
Yeah, and I'm not finished with it.
Well, and that's the nice thing about writing your life story. There is a point where if you want to publish it or do something, you will quote unquote finish it, but you are never really finished with it. So.
True.
Yeah, because each day, I
Each
don't
day.
think that I've got more to write down.
That's exactly right. Have you written any of your life story?
No.
No. How about you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I just wrote, I went to boot camp for the Navy at 29.
Okay.
So I wrote my whole boot camp experience,
Oh, perfect.
all the
Okay.
way up to getting on the bus and headed out to my first duty station.
Okay.
That's how far I got. It's like 12 pages typed, but pretty detailed because being an older woman coming in,
Mm-hmm.
expectations of me were so much higher than they were the 18-year-old little girls.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got in trouble at every turn.
Well, the nice thing is if you have started or have not started, you can start today. And what I'm going to suggest to you is I will show you how I like to teach and how I like to have you practice your writing. This little example up here on the board is supposed to resemble a loose leaf little notebook like this. The reason I like this is it lays flat. So what I would like you to do, you can start on your paper since you don't have that, but what I would like you to do is to open it up to where you have, it's not going to be the first page, but you're going to open it up so that you have a blank page on this side as well as a blank page on this side. The reason being, so just turn your page.
I wanted to ask, are those notebooks the
Yeah,
kind that?
yeah. if
Can
you
I
want
have one then,
to
please?
borrow-
Because this is
yeah.
my work.
Okay,
Okay, and I can use it for something else. No
Sure.
problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah. And as I go along, hopefully it'll make it a little more sense for you, okay? So what I would like you to do is open up your notebook. On the right-hand page, I would like you to title it, My Story.
Is it smarter to use a pencil or?
It does not make any
It doesn't
difference,
make any
whatever you
difference.
are comfortable with,
Okay.
you know?
Right.
So you write My Story on the right-hand side. Then I want you to write a portion of these things, your name, your date of birth, where you were born, place means where you were born, your father, mother's names, and we'll stop there, okay? So when you've got that part done, I'll explain why you're only doing it on the right side. As long as you just have the beginnings, your name, your date of birth, the place, mother, father, and then you can stop.
When you're putting siblings down at this time, do you put those that have deceased as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because they were all part of your family. And we'll go into a little more detail on how to fill out all of that. But for right now, we're just getting a basis for your story. So the story is going to be about you, where you came from, who your parents were, who your family were, and then you're going to start writing. Okay? So I want you to turn one more page over. And on that right-hand side, you're going to write the very first thing that you remember. The very first thing. Don't think about it. Don't give it a lot of thought. Write the very first thing that you think about. Okay? Give it a title or just start writing. And then you can figure out a title later. I want you to write 2 or 3 sentences and then stop. Don't think about spelling, punctuation. Don't think about what you're doing. Just let the words come out. Just get it down. Editing always comes later. Just get the basics down. You can always go back and do a rewrite. Got a couple sentences? I know I'm going to interrupt your thought process. It's not going to be fair, but that's okay. All right, now stop. How many of you, when you started writing, another thought popped into your head? Something related to it, something non-related to it, or were you all just very concentrating on that one thing and that was it?
Yeah, something pumped in my head because I knew there was something earlier than this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the reason you have the blank on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
So you go over there and you write a number 1, and whatever that thought was, you put it over there. Okay? The reason we do this is because you don't want to distract from this that you're focusing on now. So you're going to take this other thought, put him over here, deal with him later. But then you go back and you finish this thought. Okay? So that's why I like working this way. The more that you write, the more distractions you're going to come up with. And the more things, pretty soon you're going to find that this is almost as long as this, but you still finish this. It's always a good idea to title your work, give it a title, and date it. So that if you decide you want to come back and revisit that same subject, you'll know how long it's been since you talked about it. Sometimes you don't revisit it, but it's just a good idea.
In my journaling process and dating something, like beginning of this book started out in 2018.
Mhm.
I'm like, and it went all the way up to 2020, but I was, what happened is I could see that, oh, nothing's changed, you haven't made the changes you needed to do when I do journaling. So that just reminds me that it's been 2 years and 3 years and I haven't progressed in that area when I wanted to or something. So
Well,
that's a different type of journaling.
it's a different type of writing, but, and again, it's not like you're going to sit down today and you're going to start at the beginning of your life story and you're going to get it completed in 2 or 3 weeks or a month or whatever. You don't have to start necessarily at the beginning. You can start wherever you feel like you want to start. If there was some major event that you decided, this has happened, so I need to really maybe start recording some of this stuff. When I lost my father and my sister within a year of each other, and then a couple of uncles and my very best friend, I thought, my goodness sakes, all of these people that I love are gone. And now we're not going to get to say all these things. They're not going to know all of these things, you know. So that was another reason why I really started doing what I did. Okay. And if for some reason you find that this particular format is not working for you, there's lots of other options. A lot of people, as we age, you have arthritis and your writing is very difficult for you. Well, there is this wonderful little modern technology thing. This is a tape recorder, but it's not just a normal tape recorder. It allows you to tape it and then you can plug it into your computer and your computer types it out for you.
Ooh.
Isn't that wonderful?
Fantastic.
Yes. This one I happened to buy at Best Buy.
Does it do all the good spelling for you too?
That would come in your Word document or
Okay.
whatever you put it in.
Yeah.
But if you type it into say a Word document, then yes, I would assume that spell check would
Yeah.
come into play. But it's just another option. Some people, like if you have a laptop, they'll bring a laptop to class. So it just always goes right directly into the computer and it's done, you know. A lot of people who, especially older people, when I worked for hospice, I did some interviewing with some of the older people. And one gentleman was 99 and a half, and he was a fabulous character. And I interviewed him for 2 different days. We sat and made tape recordings. I asked him to tell me about his life. And he started talking about when he was from 9 years old or so. He could tell me every farmer he ever worked for, where they lived, how far they were from his parents. He could tell me every facet about his life from that moment to where we were sitting on his front porch. He was absolutely fabulous. And I had the tape recording. It unfortunately wasn't this type of it. It was just the old-fashioned tape recorder. And we were talking about celebrating his 100th birthday. Unfortunately, he never made it to 100.
Mm-hmm.
But on his 100th birthday, we invited his family down for a birthday party in his celebration. And I had taken my tape recordings and mailed them to the family. And when they got there, they said, "You cannot believe how wonderful it is to hear his stories in his voice."
Mhm.
So no matter what, do all of your writing, but I would also encourage you, even if you don't do this type of tape recorder, to do some kind of recording. I used to sneak into our family gatherings with my little tape recorder and kind of hide it. And so that way I could hear my mother's voice. I had my brothers talking. Yeah, I do remember them chatting one time and my mother saying, "Guys, I didn't really need to know that." They were recalling some of their little activities when they were young.
I think what's fascinating, I'm in a grief group.
Oh,
Because of
yes.
so many losses last year.
Yeah.
Through hospice.
Yes.
But one of the things that I'm finding out, and my brother-in-law, he has my sister's voice still on the phone.
Yes,
She passed
absolutely.
in September. And
Yeah.
my sister-in-law, she has my brother's voice on the phone.
Yes.
And they
Yeah.
refuse to get rid of it. And it's a comfort for them.
That's the
comfort.
reason they do it, is
Right.
because they can at one more time hear that.
And I kept calling her phone until he turned off her cell phone, just so I could hear her voice.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's why I think it's really important for you to write your story. That's very important. But if you can record just a small greeting or a small story or record different stories, then when the time comes and you're not here, they will still have that. And you know, it just means, well, you know how much it means. It means an awful lot to everybody.
Well, my sister lives in England, you know, the whole family.
That's right. So,
And she's always saying, "Have you finished your life story yet?" I even got her started.
good.
But she's completed hers.
Oh,
Of course, she's got more to go.
she
yeah.
just thinks she's complete.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and when you're talking about family, and you'll be, you know, you're working on your story, but your story is connected to your family.
Mm.
And so you may wish, like some of the students have done in my classes, is that they do genealogy. And you know what the little genealogy form looks like.
Mm.
If you've never done any of this, there are two really great resources, and one is right here in Canyon City. It's the Family Search Center. Does anybody know where the Family History Center is on Elm Street?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, they're open Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I think, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. They're staffed by volunteers, and the rest of the time they're available by appointment. But if you go in there, they will open up this website for you, and then you will start your family tree. And it's an easy thing to do. You do have to know some Bible information. And then once you get your tree established, then a lot of things come to you from the internet. Relatives you didn't even know you had, possibly.
I would have a difficulty with that though, wouldn't I?
Not
Because
necessarily
I live in-
because you're English.
Yeah.
No.
See, I lived there till I was 22.
That's not necessarily true, because
No?
I did my family search, and part of my relatives came from Ireland and Scotland, as well as Germany and England.
Mhm.
And very shortly, they will be releasing a 1950 census. You know,
It's already out.
Is it out now?
April
Okay.
1st.
Okay, April 1st, yes, I knew it was coming up. And that's going to be valuable for a lot of us. But they also have, and I researched, I was able to find my sister-in-law's family back to 0895 in England.
Uh-huh.
And I not only found, which was interesting, because back in those days, It was Sir Nigel, whatever his name was, and wife. We didn't count at all.
No.
And if they did say it was always Mrs. Nigel, whatever.
Yeah.
But I found her coat of arms, and it was fascinating. The problem with this stuff is once you get started, it's easy to get carried away. But
Yeah.
it also gives you some interesting information. I always knew that my grandfather's name was Roy R., and his name was pronounced Radel or something like that. And I thought I knew how to spell it. I found his World War I draft card with his signature, and we had been spelling it wrong. Instead of R-A-D-E-L, it was R-A-D-L-E. So it was Radley.
Yeah.
But as a child, I never knew anybody to even call him by his middle name.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him. So you will find that as you go through and you write things about it, if you start talking to other family members about stories that you've written, especially other close family members, your siblings, if you go to have gone to a function, a family event of some type, if there's 2 people attending, there's 2 different stories. Because you will take away from that event what was important to you. You may have visited with different people. You've heard different stories. You experienced different things. I go through this all the time with my brothers because they were more outgoing and everything than I was when I was younger. And they know 10 times more people than I do. And we go and we're talking about something and I go, when did that happen? Where was I? And they go, you're upstairs studying.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was. But then last week, 2 weeks ago, I got to tell them the story they'd never heard. So that was fun. But just be conscious of the fact that when you write your life story, you are writing it from your perspective. And you're not writing it to try to please anybody else or to conform to what they think. You're writing it because of your personal experience. That applies to whether it's good or whether it's a bad experience. You know, if you have strong feelings about something, sometimes writing them down is very helpful. It helps you to kind of get it out there. And as a side therapy, if you have something that is really bothering you, what you can do is just take a piece of paper, write all those feelings, get them out. If there's a person or something you write a letter to, then I strongly suggest you put it away for a few days and then go back, reread it, and then destroy it. It's kind of a therapy of a way to get rid of this thing that you've kind of been bottling up all this time. And we want you to write honestly, but we don't need woulda, coulda, shoulda. That doesn't do you any good, you know? So unless you realize you should have done something or you did something and it could have had a better outcome or different consequences, as long as you're writing it for maybe educational purposes or for, you know, but don't write it for I wish I would have done this. It's just if I could have done this, but you didn't do that. You didn't do that. So write what you actually did, what you actually experienced. And honesty, you know, be honest. Sometimes we just don't know or we didn't realize at the time. We may have hurt somebody, but we didn't know it. We were totally innocent. And if you find that there are things that you realize now that, gosh, maybe I owe that person an apology, or maybe I should say thank you to that person. I don't think they know what they did for me. Why don't I, right this moment, sit down, write them a letter and tell them how much I appreciate that. When I was a young girl, one of my aunt's favorite things to do was to come from California to Colorado, and we would always go to Estes Park for the weekend. And of course, I grew up in dryland, northeast Colorado, and going to the mountains was a big deal for me. And I was a little girl. I don't know, we were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it was. And she was a photographer. She loved to take pictures. But this was the old days when you were going to take a picture. You had to do the light meter. You had to do this to focus. You had to do that. And we're sitting there, you know, smiling. Hurry up, Alorata. But you know, years later, I ran across a box of those slides when I was, maybe we were like 8, 9, 10 or something like that. And I was so grateful to have that because my folks couldn't even afford a camera. So I was so grateful that I had that because of her. And at the time she was still living in California. So I called her and I said, you know what, I found this box. And I am so thrilled that you did that because the vacations meant everything to us and you are the only record. You had the only record we have of the trip other than our memories, but you had the physical evidence that we got to do those things. So can also be a thank you. Can also be a thank you. Whether they're here or not, doesn't matter. They are still a part of your life and still part of your memories. How you write doesn't really matter, where you start, but sometimes it's helpful if you want to sit down and make like a timeline of your life. So if you'll flip to another empty page, we'll put it on the right again just because. You can make a timeline of your life and you can make it, you know, start from whatever age you were, any time up. But just kind of take a couple minutes and just kind of write some of the highlights or something that you remember about yourself at different ages that you don't want to forget maybe later, that you want to write a different subject on. You can write about the first grade, you know, starting first grade. That's always a big deal for everybody.
I got my hair whacked off then by a teacher in the cafeteria.
Oh my goodness sakes. Well, now that's a story to write
She
about.
yanked on my head so bad.
Wow.
I'm a troublemaker. But it was first grade. When you said
Okay.
that, it's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. Okay, that better be at the top of your list then. So you think about those things. Think about all of the milestones that you've had in your life. Think about if you've moved a lot, like some of us have. Think about some of the locations that were special to you. Some of the major events when you finally got out of school and whether you went to college or whether you had a career, you'll have lots of milestones there. When you started a family, lots of milestones. So it might be helpful to you to record them in this order. If you find it more tedious than you really need to, then just start writing. One thing that might be helpful to you when you are doing a timeline is if you can relate one of your special events to what was going on in the world. Because everybody knows where they were when they heard about Pearl Harbor or when they heard about the Twin Towers, JFK's assassination, all of these major things. You know what you were doing and what impact it had on you. Those are great things to write about because that tells you what was going on in your world at that time and how it changed you. Maybe it was just a blurb on the TV or something and it didn't affect you, change your world at all, but maybe it really did change your world.
I mean, you know, you said that and I was just thinking that with what's going on in our world today.
Absolutely.
With the nuclear and possibly biological's already been here. That's where you got COVID. The chemical warfare. During the Persian Gulf, that was my job to teach all of that.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
when I'm relating to it and somebody says, you taught this, what do we do to save ourselves? And I said, bend over and kiss your husband. Basically, is what it's going to come down to. If you,
Yeah.
But yeah, it brought back all those memories of when I was teaching. I taught 58 ships in a 2-year period.
Okay, okay.
So,
So you have got a major story there to write.
yeah.
Most of us can't relate to something that current or even that significant. But still, you have a lot of events in your life that you need to write about. The main point of this is there is no wrong way to write your story. One other way that some people write their story is as writing a letter, like writing a letter to somebody, or write a letter to the future and say, I know I'm not going to be here when you read this, but if you have children, you have grandchildren, you have to remember that they're only going to know who you are by a blurb on your genealogy, or they can read your story. And they're going to have a much better idea of who you were in relationship to them. So you will be doing the future a service as well. Be yourself above all. Be yourself. I was teaching this class in California one time, and this gentleman called and he wanted to come to the class, but he was ill and he didn't think he could make it. So he said, I do have my life story already written, but my family doesn't think it's very good. He said, would you be willing to read it and help me with it? I said, well, absolutely I would. So I picked up his manuscript. It was fairly lengthy. And I took it home with me, read it over the weekend. And then that Monday after work, I took it back to him and I said, your story is fabulous. I found one typo. I said, but I wouldn't change a thing. The reason his family did not like it is that he was a jazz musician. He had difficulty working in the United States, so he moved to France. He moved to Paris. And he worked with all of these wonderful people who would become very well known in the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s. But living in Paris and having the jazz background, the way he wrote and spoke about what he did, the vernacular that he used, the little, odd phrases, were a part of what his world was. And his children thought it was, not important. I said, if you take out all of that and you just write the facts, it is going to be so boring and it is not going to be you. So I encouraged him, if he could at all possible, to leave it, to preserve it, to print it. He said he was in the process of trying to bring it up to date from where he stopped. I don't remember where he stopped. But he was at the time 86 years old. And he had written a little bit more, but he couldn't get out of his computer because his computer was down. So I said, when you are ready, let me know, and I'll look it over for you too. Unfortunately, the gentleman died within a couple weeks, But hopefully, he got the message to his family. This is who I am. He was living back in the United States, and I don't know how long he'd been back. But he had a fascinating life. And you could experience, you could feel the music, you could feel the warmth of the people, you could feel his frustration. He got it all in his story. And the way he talked, and even though I didn't understand some of the, musical terms and stuff, it was wonderful. So I encourage you, if you have a special way of talking, if you have a special vocabulary, use it, because it is you. It is you. Keep your English stuff.
Oh, yeah. I've got a lot of that I've already written, but I need to add to it.
That's okay.
I know I do.
That's okay. That's okay,
Yeah.
but you've had an interesting life, and the fact that you were born and lived in another country, you have a lot of different history
Mm.
than some of us who have maybe lifelong U.S. citizens.
Mhm.
So, the other thing is, in your stories, don't make your people or yourself either too good or too bad. Make them as you really are. We are real people. We make mistakes, and we learn from them, hopefully. And sometimes recording the ways we mess up is much better lesson for our future generation than if we would have skipped over it altogether. So don't be afraid of that. The only thing that you don't want to be is, like I said, don't be judgmental. Woulda, coulda, shoulda doesn't do any good. Another thing that I really encourage you to write about, I'm sure that you have had them in your life as I have, and that is mentors. Mentors are these wonderful people who come along beside you and help you through a situation when maybe you didn't even realize you needed them. But they're always there with you. They can start as early as being your parents or another family member. But there will be, I'm pretty sure somebody will have someone in their life most of the time. Whoever these friends are, they're a teacher. Whoever they are, if you still have one, be a sponge and learn as much as you possibly can from them. And then write about them with gratitude for all that they've given you. One thing that I would like you to do is to write descriptively as possible. And when I say descriptively, I want you to try to make, if you're writing a story, make a picture that people can actually see, especially if it's a story that has some activity, some action in it, if you're telling about a certain event. You want them to see the words, but you also want to see them in your mind. So I'm going to give you an example, and I don't expect you all to be, full-blown authors or English majors or whatever.
Good.
But this is an example that I use just to show the difference. The first sentence tells it like it is, okay? I was hot and thirsty as I walked the 3 miles home from school. I wanted a lemonade. Okay? You understand. Or, my face was as red as my hair as I walked the dusty 3 miles from school to my house. My reward was a tall glass of ice-cold homemade lemonade.
You need to taste it.
Now, I was gonna say, if you can't taste that lemonade now, so, and you don't have to try to make all of your sentences flowery or anything, but use your senses best as you can. So I'm going to read something to you. The senses that I want you to consider, and you might want to write these down, and they don't have to be in every single thing that you write, but they might be the focus of one thing or another. Sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. These are called memory triggers as well. Because anybody, when you think of sight, you think of looking at the ocean, the beach, looking at a forest. How about a sunset? When you think about taste, how about coffee, ice cream, burnt toast? There's a taste for you.
Mm-hmm.
Smell would be fresh cut grass, hot apple pie, something like that.
All load.
Yeah, there you go. Sound, if you hear a favorite song, if you hear a bird singing, if you hear a train whistle, so you're going to incorporate these. Touch would be, say, petting a cat, feeling his fur, feeling a hug and a kiss. These are all things that you can incorporate. And here we'll show you how to do some of them. The large yellow school bus became a small dot on the horizon as it left the schoolyard to deliver children to their country homes. The roar of the engine was now a whine. My nose and fingertips were beginning to feel the chill of autumn as I took my last turn on the swings. I love this time of year. Cooler days among cloudless blue skies meant the heat of summer was over. Tomorrow school would start again, and I would have all of my friends together. We've seen sight, we've seen sound. You hear, because you hear the school bus, you hear the engine. The feel, can you feel like this little girl swinging and it's cold? Can you feel that? Do you get that from the story? My few minutes of after-school playtime were over, and I ran home to the loud noise of our daily train. As I opened the front door, the warmth hit me and fogged up my glasses. I took them off and placed them on the kitchen table to return to normal while I hung up my coat. Fresh baked bread and rolls filled the room, and my mouth began to water. Mom, could I please have a roll? Only one. You don't want to spoil your dinner, was her reply. The hot, flaky yeast rolls dripping in real butter could be my dinner, I was thinking. My mother was a great baker, having learned from her mother, who regularly baked 10 loaves of bread a week while raising 10 children. Now up to your room to do your homework, was Mom's next comment. I took the narrow stairs from the kitchen to my shared room at the top. Once there, I looked out the window. Across the road was the high school, as well as the gym and lunchroom. Across the empty lot behind the school buildings was my grandparents' acreage and home, which bordered Highway 14, our only link to civilization. Being 25 miles from any big town seemed like a vast distance when I was a child. So you see, you've got sight. It's got a little action because you could see her walking up the stairs, okay? I watched as the last of the teacher's car departed, only the janitor's cars remained. For a short while, my parents had been janitors as well as school bus drivers. Going to work was a walk across the road, a good commute in anyone's mind. Okay, so that's enough of that. But do you see that there were just a few things there you don't really, you know, you could just say I walked in the door and I had a roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't give you the same feeling. I know you're not going to take time to make it a lavish story with everything that you write, but just be aware that when you are recalling your memories, you want to recall them. You want to put yourself back there again in that kitchen where it was warm after coming in outside where it was cold, and those yeast rolls that were about this big. You know, so you try to really put yourself back into your story itself as you record it.
You're almost reliving it in a way.
You do relive
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and that is one of the best things about writing your life story, is you have all of these wonderful, fond memories that you get to relive by writing it down. I mean, I'd go back to that kitchen in a heartbeat if I could.
Yeah.
You know, it just,
Eating my fish and chips.
there you go. Yeah, fish and chips.
On the way back from the ice rink.
Whatever it takes. But these are, a lot of these suggestions are just to help you maybe recall an event and to really enjoy it, relive it, and experience it, but also to really make it visible, so that your audience can see it. Your audience can know what you are feeling at that exact moment. And it will apply to the good memories. Sometimes you'll have to express the bad memories. Sometimes you need to do that. But it's okay. This is a safe place to do this. This is your story. The good news is you choose what happens to your story. You can write your story and stick it in a shoebox. You can write your story and have it published. I have a friend who's he's written his story in the form of 5 different books. He just keeps writing. So that's really good. But it's your story. But the most important thing possible that you could do with a story is to share it with your family. You know, let's face it, your children. Does everybody have children?
Not me.
Okay, I don't either, so we're talking.
Yeah.
Your children only know you as mom and dad. They don't know what your dreams were when you were a little girl. They don't know what kind of a upbringing maybe you had. They don't know what your relationship was with your parents, with your siblings, with anybody. They don't know that maybe you did some really exciting, interesting things before you became a mom and a dad, unless you've told them about these things. But I find that most parents don't tell their kids all these crazy things they did, maybe because they're afraid they'd do the same crazy things. But the gift that you're giving to the future, they're not going to know you as anybody other than a name on a piece of paper in a genealogy chart. So if you can explain to them, especially growing up in the last 75 years, we can explain to them how much technology has changed our lives. I grew up in the typical one-room schoolhouse out in the middle of nowhere. No telephone, no indoor plumbing, okay? Try to tell a 14-year-old today
Yeah.
that you did that.
Yeah, I didn't have any indoor plumbing.
Yeah. So, and they're gonna go, why didn't you?
Yeah.
You know, it
Oh,
just
how
isn't
awful.
going to make any sense to them. But if you can do your best to tell them how enjoyable it was, I love my life. We were dirt poor. I didn't care. I had fun. I had food on the table. I had playmates. I had everything my little world needed. You know, I had goals. I decided at an early age I wanted to be a teacher. And I detoured myself many, many times along that path, but finally, I are a teacher. A self-proclaimed one. Anyway, it's nice for you to revisit those parts of your life. And I know I said I grew up without a telephone, and just to prove that God does have a sense of humor, at 18 I went to work for Continental Airlines as a reservation sales agent, talking on the phone 8 hours a day. That was my life. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
The first phone I ever used was in a phone booth, a red
Oh, red
telephone
phone booth.
box.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And I had to learn how to put the pennies in.
Yeah.
And if somebody answered, you press button A.
Yeah.
And if somebody didn't answer, you press button B and you got your money back. That was how and I was about 11 years old.
And have you written that story yet?
It's right, yeah, it's right
Oh,
there.
good.
It is,
Okay.
it's in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't think about these stories until we get into a classroom situation,
Yeah,
and you
right.
go, well, man.
Yeah.
I know when I was young, probably in 3rd, 4th grade or something like that, I lived across the street from the school, so playground was always available to me, but there was not too many kids in town. So when we would get together and we'd have recess, which was always everybody's favorite, the girls would be over playing with the dolls over here, and here's Jeanne over with the boys, because we take the belt off the boys, because little boys always wore belts on their blue jeans, and we'd put it through the back loop on their jeans. And they then became our horses.
Oh,
So we could run all over the playground, and we had great fun doing that. And then a couple weeks later, our teacher said, we're going to excuse for recess, but there will be no horsing today because the mothers are tired of replacing the belt loops on the back of the jeans. Darn. So it's those little tiny memories of insignificant things, but they mean the world. They mean the world. Can you imagine telling your grandchild about something like that? They might not appreciate it, they might not understand it.
They probably wouldn't understand it.
They wouldn't understand
because
it.
they have to have that thing in their hand.
That's true. That's true.
That's where we're fortunate.
Yeah, we are fortunate because we got to see an awful lot of changes. I think we got to grow up in a time period that where my mom was a full-time mom. My dad worked 3, sometimes 4 jobs to take care of us. We sat down for dinner every night together as a family. You didn't get to watch TV when we finally got one. You couldn't do anything until your chores were done and your room was cleaned. Okay? We thought nothing of it. That was just the way that it was, you know. And our biggest playground was always school activities. We were very highly involved in school. And our parents never missed a play, a sporting event, never. Didn't matter. They never missed that. So I think we were very, very lucky growing up when we got to grow up. So you need to tell the story about what type of a child were you. Troublemaker, we already established that one. Okay. I was studious. But think about what type of a child you were and how it changed through the different grades that you went through. I was always pretty shy, but I was always determined I was going to be a teacher, so studying was big on my list. So I missed out on some things. And when you're talking about your siblings, when you're writing about your siblings, tell what they were. Where did you come in the birth order? That's important for how you became, too. Oldest ones are always more responsible ones. The youngest one's always the baby, gets more attention. The middle ones are kind of forgotten. But describe your relationship with them. Each sibling, if you had 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, whatever it was, describe your relationship with them. And when you're telling your story, especially as your childhood, as you're growing up, what were your favorite things to do? We know playground is very important. As a family, we used to play board games. You get together, everybody played board games, you know, as a family. That was a big deal. My mom and dad loved to dance. So we would go to the community dances as a family. And this was even when we were little tykes, because there weren't babysitters around. So the dance was usually held in the community hall. And so the parents would come in, the kids all go in a corner, you pile all the coats in the corner, and the kids piled all on the coats, and you went to sleep. And the parents danced. So, but, you know, and that's just, I'm just telling you what's happening in my world. Now, your world could be completely different, but you understand what I'm saying is that what type of an atmosphere did you grow up in as a child? That will explain a lot of the influences that you had and what determined what type of an individual you became and why you became what you did. If there was somebody in your family that you admired and you wanted to become like them, you know, if you have that type of a person in your life, then tell who that was and why you wanted to become like them. So, or why you didn't want to become like somebody, if you had one of those in your life. Okay. as you go through your book, and a lot of times I teach this in chronological order, so we start with being a child, go up to the teenage years, go into being college age, young adult, marriage, family, and then we finally get up to present day, which we're going to cover in a rough format here for this class. But mostly I just want you to encourage you to be comfortable with this style of writing. I want to encourage you to try to sit down, take this little notebook, sit down every day, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, whatever works best for you, and write for 10 minutes. Not asking you to write a chapter, not asking you to write a whole bunch of stuff. Sit down and start writing for 10 minutes. And as you write, and as it becomes easier and easier, you'll find that 10 minutes turns to 20, maybe to 30. But always, if it does, and you have those little nagging other things, start using the left side for your little note-taking, for those little things that you know you want to write about, but you can't because you're focusing on this current project. So if you start 10 minutes a day, it takes the pressure off thinking that, oh my gosh, I've got to sit down and write, all about my childhood in one night. You don't have to do that, just a little bit at a time. But since I've had you start using this format, do you think you're comfortable with this, or do you want to go back to a different format for yourselves personally? You want to give it a try?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be back next week?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's the reason I'm asking is because I would love to see your progress. I want to see the progress that you're making here. Okay. Let's see. What haven't I talked about yet? Okay.
Do you have this book for sale? Or?
Not yet,
Not
because
yet.
I don't have. I'm down to like a couple of copies left. So this
see.
is my working copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it will probably be very similar to this when we finally get it printed the way it's supposed to be done.
And then this, I gotta write this down so I can order it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that sometimes we are given, like this was a gift from me, to me from my mother. And if you have ever received one of these, or you ever, know anybody that you think you would love to have part of their life story and they're not about to sit down and take a class like this, you can find these at different stores. But they will go through and they will ask some of the same questions that I'm asking you to do. And I got my mother to fill this out, and so some of it we didn't quite get to all of it. But this is a really good way to get people, older people especially, who it seems don't think their life is worth writing about, and that is absolutely.
Or even talking about.
Yeah, that's the farthest thing from the truth, because you don't understand that we are all walking pieces of history.
Yeah.
We truly are, because we lived at a time that doesn't exist anymore. We are, I don't want to say relics, but
Well,
Some of us are.
I'm getting there.
but we're very important for the information that we contain. So we're like, you could come to us and check us out because we're a living history book. And sometimes I get questions from my nephews who are 40 years old, but still, they have questions about different things because they didn't really know my family growing up. So it's interesting to try to tell them about what it was like to live in the situation that I did, where I did, and how we did, So,
I never asked my mother stuff to tell me. I didn't. When you're a kid, you don't think about that. They're just your mother,
Well, and
I can't go back on that.
That's
now,
right.
Of course.
And so what you're doing here right now is you are providing your family with all the information
Right, yeah.
that they probably won't ask you right now, but in another 10 years, maybe they wish they would have asked you. You know, you don't know that. You're writing this story for yourself, but you're also writing it for your family. I've had the experience where the people, especially with the recordings, that I have sent recordings to some people and they couldn't deal with them because the loss was too fresh. And maybe a couple of years later they would write me a letter or call me and say, wow, I finally got to listen to the tape today. I finally got to read the little note that you sent about your time with my mother. It really meant the world to me. And now I am so grateful, but this is the earliest I could do it. So you're providing a little time capsule basically for them of your life story from your perspective, you know. But your life story is involved with a lot of people. You're involved with your spouses, with your children, with their children, with your friends, with the rest of your family. You have a big audience that you're writing for. And chances are pretty good they don't know much about you, right? They don't know your deepest, truest feelings.
No, that's true.
And so now's the time if you have something to say to them that you can reveal it to them and let them know, I love you. I realize maybe I was a little cold and a little distant. It had nothing to do with you. It was my personality at that time. So I realize that now. So here's my attempt to make up. Let's sit down, read my story together. And you can ask me questions that maybe I didn't answer. That's always a good thing to do,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you know. So we've got, can we take just a couple of minutes and I'll have you do one more exercise. I want you to blank piece of paper.
Oh,
I know you have to leave in like 10 minutes, Sheila.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not today.
Not today.
Next
Oh,
week is-
next week.
Next
Okay,
week is my
okay.
lunch. No
Okay.
problem. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to find the perfect subject for you here. Okay. This can be at any age, can be young, old, current, whatever. I want you to write, the title of this is going to be My Best Friend. That's the title of your story. Now I want you to write about your best friend. And why are they your best friend? This could be somebody related to you, could be somebody totally different from your family. Oh, and we didn't do one exercise that's on the board, so we'll save that till later. It's okay, it's all right, it's okay. I just want them to get started.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've got 2 or 3 sentences. I'm going to interrupt you again. Sorry. With time constraints here. I want to give you some homework. First thing, I want you to finish your complete family history. You know, finish this basic family history. And be, if you can be specific, like if your parents have passed or something, be specific about when they were born, where they were born, when they died, where they died. You know, these are important things to do. But try to get that in order so that you, again, it fills out a little bit more about yourself. So that's one part of your homework. The other part is called serendipity. Serendipity means the occurrence and development of events by chance or in a happy or beneficial way. I want you to write about such an event in your life. You can do more than one if you've had more than one. I will give you an example. When I was living in my motorhome, I was up in Oregon at a campground and was told there were some blackberry bushes outside the campground that we could go pick blackberries. So a friend and I went to pick blackberries. As we're walking back to the campground, there's this little old man and he's next to a blackberry bush and there's all these maidenhair ferns and he's pulling out the maidenhair fern and then he's stripping all the leaves off of it. So I walk by him and I go, hello, and just kind of look at him and go walking on and I said, no, I gotta know. So I stop, I turn around, I go back and say, excuse me, what are you doing? He goes, well, I make pine needle baskets. The rib of the maidenhair fern is black, and I use it as an accent in my pine needle baskets. I thought, okay, makes sense now. He said, are you young ladies at the RV park? And we said, yes. He said, would you like to see some of my baskets? We said, sure. He said, I can bring them back in about a half an hour. So he came back, showed us his baskets. Not only did he bring us baskets, he brought us everything we needed to make a basket ourselves. He sat us down, he got us started. We had a wonderful afternoon with this gentleman. So to thank him for his doing all of this for us, we said, tomorrow as a group we're having a brunch. Would you come back and have brunch with us? And he said, sure. So he's walking around meeting everybody because we're all from different places. And he walks up to me and he said, thank you for including me. He said, I forgot to ask you, where are you from? I said, I'm from a little town in Colorado you've never heard of. He said, what is it? I said, it's Stoneham, Colorado. He said, okay, that's 65 miles east of Fort Collins on Highway 14. I said, how do you know that? He says, because for 30 years I was a topographical cartographer, which I went, what is that? He said, I mapped the entire state of Colorado by hand. Yes. So this gentleman knew exactly where I lived. We became very good friends. He lived in Oregon, and over the 10 years that I knew Joe, he was a fabulous individual. He was still working for the National Forest Service, mapping campsites, mapping hiking areas, and almost until the day he died. But what he did for me was that he was so encouraging as my path went along. Being a map maker, in the days that he was a map maker, he had to develop a certain type of printing that was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. So he would write me little letters. You know, his letters were usually like on little pieces of paper about this long. He didn't think he had anything to say, so they were always very short notes. But because he knew how small a town I lived in, he always loved to address my letters just Dean and Jeanne, Stoneham, Colorado, or he'd call me Lass Schmidt, and just because he knew that the postmistress would always get the letter to me because the post office was so small. But he just loved playing kind of these little tricks He was a fabulous gentleman. Had I not stopped to ask him that question, I would have missed out on knowing a fabulous person. So think about the fabulous people in your life. Is there somebody, maybe you didn't meet them on such a bizarre circumstance, but who are the fabulous people in your life that have enriched it? So that's the second part of your,
Now, where did you say you were from? What was the name?
it's called Stoneham.
Stoneham?
Mhm.
U-M is the end?
No, S-T-O, Stoneham.
Oh, Ham.
Stoneham.
Stoneham. Stoneham.
Do you know where Sterling is?
Yes.
Okay, it's 25 miles west of Sterling.
Never heard of
Population
Stoneham.
is about the size of this room.
Yeah.
Truly.
That's surprising that you don't pronounce it Stoneham, because whenever I tell people where I'm from, Nottingham,
Mhm.
you don't say Nottingham,
No.
and it's kind of a,
Mhm.
but here in the States, like they say Birmingham. Yeah.
It's always been Stoneham.
Stoneham, yeah, yeah.
I don't know, my grandparents homesteaded there, so.
Where were they from?
One set was from Nebraska, one was from Kansas, eventually,
Oh, yeah.
from England and Germany, basically.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
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 Yeah,
Hmm.
so.
When you said complete our family history, do you want that just the facts, or do you want that as a story as well?
You can do, I would love you to do both.
Okay.
I would love you to do both. The reason I have you put it out with the facts first is then you build your story off of that.
Okay.
So this is really for you.
Yeah.
This is for you.
I'm into genealogy, so.
Then you will be fabulous. Yes. And I have had classes where they did the genealogy along with the story writing, and this one lady even included family photos with her genealogy. So, I mean, it was fabulous. So use it as, get your facts down first, which with genealogy, that's easy to do. And then start writing your stories. And do it however you want to. Remember, this is your life story. I'm just giving you suggestions. The nice thing about this, guys, is there's no grading.
Yeah.
I don't check for
Yeah.
punctuation,
Yeah.
grammar, or
Oh,
nothing.
good.
So we're
Plus
good.
for everybody.
Now,
Yeah.
is it just these two things then?
That's the only homework
That's
for
the
the,
homework.
you'll have more homework next week.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes,
I was just yawning.
that's okay.
I did want to mention, because
Yes.
you talked about a lot of different things, but one thing I did, I moved from Virginia in 10 and came to Guffey.
Okay,
And we built a house up there and everything, and since then we've got divorced, but
okay.
you know, we did it all up there, and then I bought a house down here. But what happened is in 2012, I realized how much I missed my girlfriends of 25 plus
Yeah.
years.
Mhm.
So 3 of them. So I sat down and I wrote each of them a different letter, but telling them how much they meant to me when I
Yes.
was there and
Yes.
what they gave me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, our friends, I have one girlfriend that she'll disagree with everything I do, and the other girlfriend, she'll challenge me every time I turn around. And we need those different type of people in our lives. And so I wanted to bring to light to let them know how much I appreciate them and what they've given me. And we're still friends,
Yes,
you
yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And when I go to Virginia, I see them all the time. So,
That letter writing not only applies to friends, but to family.
yeah.
You know, especially if you, like a lot of families do, when the kids get grown, they leave home and sometimes they're at polar opposites in the country. They don't really see each other, but they still have this bond, and maybe they need to communicate a little bit better, and maybe writing a letter saying, remember when we were growing up, how you always took care of me, how you always helped me out, you were always my protector. I really appreciate that, and I don't think I ever said thank you for it. So that's what you've done with your friends, and that's fabulous. You know, and if you have lots of friends like this, write them a letter too. Include them in your story. They are part of your story. They are part of your story. Not only your family is part of your story, but, you know, your whole world grows.
Now, when you say family, is that just like mother, father, and siblings?
Family could be grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins, yeah.
Mhm.
Whatever you decide is your
my
family.
family. Okay,
Yeah, whatever
yeah,
you decide.
right.
My family would fill a large city.
Of course, some of mine, a lot of mine are gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter because you're writing about your remembrance
Okay.
of them.
Mhm.
You know, so
Yeah.
what part did they play in your life? Anybody that you write about in your story, you're writing about them because they played a part in your life. Maybe some were only there for a very short time,
Yeah.
but maybe they made a big impression while they were there. So,
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
so I hope to see you all next week,
Yes.
and bring your friends.
I do know somebody else was supposed to be here today that signed up. She said she'd be here on Thursday.
Okay, all right. Well, that's fine because we can get started, you know, if they miss this class, it doesn't matter. We'll get them up to speed real quick.